people asking us questions online. What do you got there?
So basically, we haven't had our Viking Talks video in some time, so we wanted to do something a little more informal and kind of asked you guys what you want to hear. So we're gonna literally read those questions out loud and just kind of go through them. These are pretty standard questions that I get through emails and air shows and everywhere else that we kind of consider kind of standard across the board, but I do realize that a lot of you don't really know those things, and we kind of forget that. So we can cover some of these items, and if we don't get to them all, we will next time. But we just kind of wanted to one-on-one kind of just go through these questions and give you some answers.
Yeah, and it's really unique what you said there, because I saw you just posted something last night on one forum, like, what do you guys really, if you were to choose this engine over the other or whatever, which of course is important to us because we sell engines, what are the things what are you worried about? What are you asking about? What are the things that come to your mind about the engine? And you asked those exact questions last night, and I can't believe the number of questions that you got just in a matter of a couple of hours, and then just being able to, we thought, why don't we just jump on it the next day and keep doing this and answering right away the questions that you might have.
So basically we're going to go through those questions. Some of those are from prospective builders, people that just have questions, some of them that are already customers, and you worry about, what little things are they most cautious and concerned about. So I want to kind of state one thing. This is obviously going live on our YouTube, but if you are not a member of the Viking Engine Owners and Prospects group on Facebook, that's a great place to see service bulletins, real customers talking, real troubleshooting if there is issues, real adventures that are happening there and stuff like that. And it's a very important part of being a Viking customer is to kind of be involved in that spectrum of things. But I want to go ahead and let's just start going down some questions. Some of these might roll into each other, so if I skip one, it's because it's going to be answered all together.
Okay.
So Andy White asked about reliability long-term and maybe showcasing some of the owners that have the higher hour engines. And that kind of goes along with the next question. With teardowns of higher time engines, would be interesting to measure the wear and tear against engines used in the auto application, as well as our gear reduction drive teardown as well.
My favorite answers to that, what I read online, was that some guys were, obviously some people are like, well, I'd like to have a lot of statistical data, and can you show me 20 years of history of how many failures and stuff. But that wasn't really my favorite. My favorite was the guys that were talking about that they wanted the latest and greatest in engines, and they understood that because of the fact that some of these engine models, like a Honda Accord, 2021, 2022 Honda Accord, even though Viking's been around for over 10 years doing the Honda engines, the Honda engines that we use they're not that old, but the good thing is, and this was really my favorite, people pointed out that Viking only has to kind of show that this works in an airplane, and flying it around, and that a lot of people are putting 200-300 hours on their engine every year and all that. But the core engine, very little to prove there, because it's a Honda engine, and we don't really go into the engine so much. We don't tear it apart. We use the engine basically the way it comes from the car, right?
Yeah, and as discussed in some of our other videos, we get very low time engines. So when we do that, we're not breaking down and tearing down. This isn't a 30, 40, 50,000 mile engine that we're tearing apart and breaking down. We're not, we're getting it, we're doing, obviously backgrounds on the engine, we know where they come from, and then we're, pulling spark plugs and very standard stuff that kind of gives us everything that we need to know because of the very low mileage that's already on the engine. And everything is run here before it leaves, everything's tested, warranted, that type of stuff. So that's never anything we've ever had an issue with, and that's something that we discussed too, is that it's been about 13 years we've been doing the Honda conversions, and within that we've never had an internal engine failure, and that has to do with the reliability behind the Honda name, and that's something that we rely heavily upon. So where we concentrate our time in our gearbox is our fuel system, making sure electrical connections are as good as they can be, to maintain that reliability throughout your entire installation.
Yeah, but you know, it goes even further than that because we really have gotten a little bit spoiled with that. Because yeah, like in the office, you work with people, they want to have, you know, maybe a new thing we got, a magnet for the drain of the gearbox or something like that. Like external minor tweaks and updates. But we're not going to talk about other engines. We're not going to talk negative about anything. We're not going to talk our engine up. But the fact is, I do hear that there are issues with engines. We're so spoiled we don't have internal issues with the engines. But we read about piston problems, ring problems, carburetor problems, all these things that we're so lucky not to have to even think about because we're dealing with a phenomenally well-designed Honda engine. Can you even imagine if Honda or Suzuki or Ford or Chevrolet or any of these modern cars that you go out and buy, if they had like internal engine issues, like things that actually breaking inside the engine, how could they possibly survive? And I think we've gotten so spoiled in our business, and we realize that you guys might even be thinking that well, is a Honda engine going to last a long time? And when it's in an airplane, of course it's going to last a long time. It's still the great engines, the same engine they use in their cars, they use it in their outboard motors. You look at the amount of engineering and testing and thousands or millions of cars that are out there. There's no comparison to anything else that are like dealing with bolts that come loose or crankshafts that there's just not, and we're just lucky that way. We're really lucky.
I want to touch on the actual question, which is reliability and long term, and some of the owners that have some of the higher hour engines. So in about 13 years, obviously people purchase their engines. They're still in the middle of a build process. These are not typically ready to fly airplanes. So I think the average flying time for people yearly is about 50 hours if they're lucky, and that's the reality. So not only do they have to go through the build process, but they have to get a flying engine and an airframe and a flying aircraft altogether, and they now need to fly that for 50 hours a year. And so longevity is one thing, but 13 years, most of our people are falling between 500 and 800 hours. That's where most of them are sitting now. And we have some in 1,200 and 1,600 hours. And this is all with just basic maintenance. And then you have people that are kind of come around over the past couple years because this is such a plug and play product that they are not having to do a lot of maintenance. They are just flying their airplane every single day, and they're putting 100 hours a year, 200 hours, 300 hours. We have people, Dave Shalema is very well known in the Zenith community, and he has over 600 hours now in I think it's like 2.5 years.
Feels like we just were there.
Yeah.
Installing his engine, and
Yeah.
it's
And then
amazing.
Bill Fay, he had flown just shy of 200 hours in a year, I think it was. So these people are accumulating a very large amount of that, and these are with newer items that we have brought to the market over the past couple of years, like our variable pitch propeller. So they're really stressing the engine a little bit more. They're pushing boundaries on the gearbox. They're really doing everything and then some. And we're not seeing, the engine is not stressed. The engine doesn't have issues. And a lot of how we know that is we consistently, and we always recommend this, that people do Blackstone lab reports or whatever lab reports you want to do. That's just one that we like, and it gives a really good basis of everything that we know. And at 500-600 hours, doing oil changes 80 hours apart and stuff, we're seeing great oil reports come back talking about the internals of the engine looking great, and that goes across the field. We're not getting bad oil reports on anything about the internals. So we recommend that being done with the engine itself and with the gearbox. We prefer every 25 hours for that to be done. Some people stretch it a little bit farther, but that's what we recommend.
So that's the longevity and all that. And I think there's a couple of sides to this. When you go on a forum online, you see there's always different opinions. We all have different opinions. I think, and I would hope, that most people that see that a Honda engine that they can go and buy in their car would just like automatically assume, and rightfully so, that's a great engine. You're putting a Honda in there, that's what I want. And then, so you exclude that, like the engine's perfect. Did you guys tinker with the engines? Nope, engine's just the same as it was in the car. Wow, that's even great, even better. How about the gearbox? How about the computer? How about the wiring? Well, you're onto something there. We do tinker with that because we want it to run in an airplane. But the basic mechanical part of the engine is identical to what it is in the car. So now you really have narrowed down your research as far as, do you trust a company that has made this auto conversion to do those other things for you, converting that engine over to an airplane engine, putting a gearbox on it, doing the dyno runs, testing it, putting their own effort and flying this engine in an airplane all over the country, having customers that are faithful to your company, and like Alyssa was saying, actually go out there and put 200 to 300 hours a year on an experimental airplane with basic maintenance, oil changes, not even really doing the spark plugs, because as you know, the new cars, they do what, 150,000 between spark plug changes?
Yeah.
So it's pretty amazing like that.
And the bottom line is if we have a basic sheet that we give people to try to kind of do their air condition inspections on and what little needs to be done. But it is bare minimum, very much like your car. You take it in to have the oil changed. Maybe once every couple years you'll change your alternator belt or little things like that. But outside of that, you're not messing with the internals of the engine in most cases. But I wanna keep moving on, and
Okay, what else you got?
I want to talk about the gear reduction.
Okay.
And tear downs of that and where we're at with our gear drive over the past 13 years.
Okay, well I can say that, we're not saying that there's never any upgrades to any of our parts. Our gearbox has been really, I'd say, pretty much flawless throughout the development of the Viking engine, the Viking 110, the Viking 130, now the Viking 150 and the 195. Obviously, as you get into more horsepower, you're extracting more power continuously through a variable pitch propeller where you're lowering the RPM, maintaining that manifold pressure, and really working things hard. We constantly look at these things and we improve. So yes, through the years we have analyzed, we need a different type of bearing over here, we need a double set of bearings over there. And that's just been a continued upgrade and improvement, which we don't look down at. We basically look at that as an evolution, basically, of a gearbox to make sure that it is strong enough and can last safely in any one of the horsepower ranges that we have for our engine. And we just recently, comes to mind, we like I mentioned in the beginning, we added a magnetic pickup for drain so that we could keep the oil cleaner and longer, and nothing different than what you would do in a standard transmission in a vehicle, in a car. So yes, that's not been a failure-prone item. It's not been 100% trouble-free either. We have basically just said that you will fly the gearbox, you will monitor your temperature, you will change the oil on a regular basis, and most people have then been able to do 200-300 hours a year with no issues. That doesn't mean that we are not constantly looking at the gearbox and making sure that it is the best that we can do.
Yeah, I think the biggest improvement is when we introduced the Viking 195. We tried to use what at that time was the Viking 130 gearboxes on our bigger horsepower engine, which many of you followed us on that trip to Alaska that we were taking, and you guys made it to Montana. And a lot of people ask about that, and that was purely testing after a very, very new aircraft. A week later, it was just finished, and we were all of a sudden going to take it to Alaska. So it was a very new aircraft, and we were testing a lot of new things. So we made it to Montana, and we wound up flying it back due to weather deterioration. And also, again, at that time, we saw upgrades that needed to happen. And it's not because there was any catastrophic failure of anything, because at that time, there's not. You just see areas that need enough improvement that where you're not taking those chances going into kind of rougher terrain and rougher territory and stuff like that. And that all led to a much bigger improvement to what we do now, which is our, you know, that those front housings are now used across all of our engines, and we've made it bigger and beefier. And those are just learning things. Were those gearboxes working great on the 130s and most of them still flying today? Absolutely. Does that mean that there is an update available if people want to do it? Absolutely. And those options are available to people because we never want to stop improving, and we always want to make it better. And that's what we'll continue to do. That will not change.
And that is a nice thing about, you know, there's always another question. I don't know if this is part of these questions, but sometimes there's a question about, well, what is the size of your company? You know, how many people are working there and all that. And I think it goes both ways. You know, if you're a smaller company, of course, Viking Aircraft is a certain number of employees that work in our facility in Florida. Then there's welding shops and machine shops and gear hobbing shops, and you know, if you add that together, it becomes a sizable company. But as far as like your personal touch with a company for your light sport airplane engine, you probably can't do better than with a smaller company. Some people want a larger company. Well, it's, you know, you call one of them and you can't get anybody on the phone, and you can't find the right person on the phone. You call a smaller company, and instantly you can be in touch with the person that designed it, the owner, whoever can help you directly and look after you the best.
So, I mean, in many ways, we find that as a huge thing, which is part of why we've become a big part of this community, is we see a lot of it as family. This is home. This is it for us. And so we always want to do the best that we can do. You're not a number. And we always strive to do the best that we can, and we'll always kind of meet you in the middle and make things perfect.
How about 8 o'clock at night?
Yeah, well, here we are. So it's this is what we do, and we'll continue to do it, and we strive to be perfect, and what we can't make perfect, we're sure going to get it as close as possible. But let's keep rolling through these questions. I know we can go off on our tangents. So
Well, let's got.
Servicing and maintenance the engine, and can you use 100 low lead if you don't have access to MoGas? We kind of touched on servicing and maintenance. Servicing, obviously, you can do it yourself. You can maintain everything yourself. If you have somebody that's maybe more qualified as a mechanic, you can absolutely have them look at it if you want, but you're really not doing anything outside of a basic oil change, gearbox oil change. We'd like you to send those into Blackstone as discussed. We have a specified list, but you're really not doing anything crazy that you need to be working on the internals of the engine. Granted, all those parts are readily available for you, both through us or Honda or whomever. And you know, many times I don't hear from people until they're like, oh, like I'm at like 750 hours, but I need to know, like, where can I get this? And I didn't even know they were flying. And it kind of happens that quick because people are out flying their engine. They're doing most of their maintenance themselves. So sometimes we just don't hear from people for a very long time. And that's all because it's pretty maintenance free.
Well, but also don't listen to, you know, like when you do this research, and of course you guys and gals hang out at the airport too, in EAA chapters, and everybody wants to be an expert, and you know, make your own decision. When someone comes over to you and says, oh, auto conversion, you're not going to find an A&P want to touch that with a 7-foot pole. And
we have many A&Ps flying our engines.
Those kinds of things. Those are so old-fashioned. You will find when you research about these engines, you will have all these naysayers, and you will, in your own mind, after listening to us and doing more research, you'll find out that, well, you're just regurgitating what you heard on the at some other EA.
And I feel like that's changed over the years too.
Little, yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. We yeah.
Well, I mean, it seems like we're answering kind of the same questions
But these
over
are
and
people.
over
These
again.
are just newcomers or people that don't know and stuff like that. You know, we have about 1,000 engines worldwide now. That number continues to grow. We have dealers in Australia. Thanks, Swishy. We've got, you know, dealers in Mexico. We're getting ready to expand to the Argentina area. So things are continually growing and getting bigger, and people are really tired of paying these overpriced, ridiculous amounts just because they feel like they have to, when people now have a long-standing rapport of customers and people flying and easy maintenance. So they're seeing all this stuff, and people are coming to the conclusion that maybe high RPMs, it can't be done. Well, it's 13 years it's being done, and frankly, we don't run very high RPMs. But unless people really know, they don't know. So yeah, I think that's definitely a misnomer. Most people know in the experimental field who we are at this point. It just doesn't mean they don't have questions about what we're doing.
But jumping back to that maintenance thing, yeah, of course we want you to go to our shopping cart or call us when you want your fuel filters for your annual or inspection and all that stuff. But it doesn't mean you have to. That you can get the parts everywhere. We like to see you buy the parts from us only because a fuel filter is a fuel filter if it has the same part number. We all know that they're made in different places, that they don't have exactly the same quality and all that kind of stuff. So if you bought it from us, then at least it will be the same filter that we flew in our airplane. But that being said, Honda and now with all these Viking engines is worldwide, and the parts are available everywhere. You need a starter on the weekend, you can get it at a whole auto parts store. You need an alternator, you can get it. You need some fuel filters, you can get them. You need an oil filter, you need oil. You don't have to, it's humorous to me, nothing against you guys that do this, but you go to Oshkosh and you see the guys with the big carts hauling oil home. It's like, why are you doing that? Because special oil, it's aviation oil. Well, and we forget this stuff. We can buy it everywhere. I mean, it's car oil. It's 020 car oil. Every corner store has it.
Okay, we're gonna make this video forever long if you don't keep it for long.
Well, let's rush along here. Let's get some other questions.
100 low lead. Can you use it? And do you have access to MoGas? If you don't have access to MoGas,
you can use 100 low lead, but don't do it. I mean, use it when you have to. Like if you're out and about and you have to get home, or you're planning a trip and you can only get 100 low lead over here, and then you're gonna do car gas over here, and all, then you just use it and you put the additive in, the Declan additive, and you'll be all right. But as far as the Honda engine, it doesn't like it.
That's actually not just exclusive to Honda. I want to make a point that most experimental engines do not like lead.
No, that's exactly. I mean, we can mention names at this point.
But they just don't.
Rotax, UL. I mean, anything that's like a small bore engine, if it's not a big light limit, they don't like it. And you'll find it all throughout the whole engine.
And most people use the Declan, and that's what they use. But if you can get MoGas, it's definitely more preferred. Can you use both? Yes. Would we prefer you for the longevity of your engine, and just definitely go the MoGas route. And that is kind of a topic of discussion throughout aviation right now, is the expansion of that into more and more airports.
Well, it used to always be like, people were talking about 100 low lead's going to be going away, and it was always like, wow, it never did. But now, with all this EPA stuff, it's actually getting
They're pushing it a lot harder than they ever
it's
used
being
to.
pushed pretty hard. It's going to disappear, the leaded fuel. In addition to, there's like 3 or 4 different non-leaded fuels that have now been FAA certified and are being distributed throughout the country, and you find them more and more and more. So I would lean towards an engine that is clean running without the lead as far as the future.
I want to take a brief moment, and this is a question I just thought about, kind of related to that. People always talk about the ethanol, and do I have to have ethanol free? And they just assume that they have to with this engine. That is not true. Just like at the car pump, when you pull up in your car, you do not have to have ethanol free. I know a lot of the road taxis and stuff like that have to, or whatever the case may be. It doesn't really make a difference. Don't spend the extra money to have some kind of ethanol free. It doesn't matter. We also were early adapters to Swift fuel, which works well with our engines as well. So you have plenty of options out there. You're not limited, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
What else you got?
Okay, the safety of the electrical ECU system is probably what I will be considering the most as a critical component of the Viking setup. What can I be doing in my electrical work to ensure safety, as that's where the biggest problems are likely to come from? And as a more direct question, I'm keen to understand what, if any, redundancy is built into the ECU from a hardware design perspective. What are the points of failure within the black box, so to speak?
Okay, so let's compare the two systems. I mean, we got the traditional, and we've got we got three. We got the traditional, which has a lot of cables, mixture cables, carburetor heat, throttle cable, and choke cable, and mechanical things to operate your engine, and usually the pilot is involved to manipulate those things. It's been fairly reliable throughout the history of aviation. Usually if there's an issue, it's a broken cable or pilot error or something like that. Not 100% trouble-free, takes some maintenance, and has had accident incidents. It's just like anything else up through the years. Then you go with the FADAC or ECU controlled operation of an engine. You've got basically a couple of different systems. You've got a very simplified system where it is made with high-end components, and there's a one ECU, one plug per cylinder, one coil per cylinder, and all that, and it's focused on making that engine run with a minimum amount of components and as reliable as possible with quality components. And then you have the system where, because of ASTM certification, FAA certification, because of a certification requirement, which roots way back in history of dual plugs and why they're needed and all this kind of stuff. I mean, airplanes don't have dual carburetors unless they have to have it. I mean, usually there's one carburetor at the bottom, single air filter, single crankshaft, single camshaft, single.
There's always single points of
There's
failure.
single points of failure everywhere. So Viking's approach to that has been very successful. We decided on the single ECU with the high quality components. So what we do is we take the components that are on the engine that are Honda components, and as you've seen throughout the years, it used to be when fuel injection was first introduced in cars that there were occasional issues. Might burn out a coil, might take out a spark plug, something like that. These things have been ironed out of the designs. They've done plastic intake manifolds, valve covers in order for the coils to be bolted to plastic rather than to metal. The coils have a single bolt instead of several bolts. There's all kinds of things that have been done by the auto industry to make sure that heat doesn't get to the spark plugs to coils. They've eliminated things like spark plug wires completely. So all these things that used to fail are not even present anymore. There's no distributor that sends signals to different coils, so you can't have a distributor failure. Every coil has its own, every spark plug has its own coil. So for some strange reason, which would be even less likely in an airplane where you have cool air going over the engine, you had a coil failure, you're down at the most one cylinder. The good thing about all of this, and I'm going to explain now why we do what we do, and I'm going to show you some examples, but before I do, I want you to know that we have, not just in the 10 years of Viking, but in 30 years of auto engine conversion history within our facility, we have never had an in-flight ECU like shutdown. Like where you basically just flying along and then the ECU says, I don't want to run anymore, poof, engine quits, you land, and the ECU burned up. No, never happened. So it's a very popular question, how many redundant things are in the ECU, but it really doesn't come down to that. It comes down to the quality of the components, the quality of the wire loom that runs these components. It should be aviation grade tough cell wiring, proper crimps like you do with your avionics, proper crimping tools, proper shielding, all this kind of stuff. That's what's important. Now when you start doubling up dual ECUs, dual crank sensors, dual everything, you end up with a mess. You end up with complexity, switchovers, things that can fail. So if you have a very simple system that uses high-end components, like I want to grab this, what we have here on the floor. Basically, it's very simple. It's a box with a circuit board that obviously is high-end because it's designed to run for a long time. Uses a couple of waterproof connectors with the tough cell wire. Now the other end of that is the stuff that runs the engine. Okay, some of these things get a signal going to the ECU. The ECU processes that, sends it back out, and tells whatever it's connected to what to do. Like if it's for a fuel injector, it tells it to turn it on for a certain number of milliseconds. If it's for a coil, it tells it to fire the spark plug at the right time. And that's all it does. Nowhere in this can you see any mechanical components. There's not a single one. Now, I'm going to narrow this down, this entire harness, to the next part of the question.
Yeah, I was gonna.
Yeah, which is this wire right here. See this guy right here? Okay, one ring terminal. That is the entire second half of the question. How do I make sure that, like when I have, like as if I have a magneto-based system, that all this stuff keeps running? Well, it needs electricity. That's the only difference. Now, do we have any backup to electricity? Sure we do. We got the alternator, can run all day long just on the alternator. Has a battery one, run all day on battery one. Has a backup battery, can run all day on the backup battery. So it can run on 3 different things independently or all 3 on at the same time. So your only job, like one of our customers I think was asking, and he's wiring his airplane right now, what can I do to make sure that when I'm working on my airplane and installing the Viking engine, that I will be safe? And since there's never been an issue with any of the electronics or the quality of the wire harnesses, your only job is to make sure that you got power to this one wire. Okay? So we have that all in our wire diagram. It shows you how this has to be very simply wired directly to the battery. So when the master switches are on, you already have power to this.
It all comes down to workmanship. That's the reality. If you care about what you're doing and you care to learn about how to wire something correctly, you will learn how to do it and you'll do it.
And simplicity.
And we've had instances where maybe workmanship could definitely be stepped up a few notches. And there's some workmanship that goes above and beyond. You know, that's just how it is in every scope of life. I'd like you to, can I see that again for just a moment?
Oh, for sure,
I'm
yeah.
going to go back into the next question. And that is, someone also asked a question about,
Like data logging.
basically, yes. So we have our DB9 connector here, and we have a data logger. I don't want to have one on here, have one here with me. But we do have a video on that on our YouTube, but it plugs right in here, and you can see everything that's going on. You can log everything that's happening. You can record it all. So if you have a skip or something like that was happening, we can see all that in the recording, and we can, you know, figure out for troubleshooting what's going on. So that's already existent within all of this. So what do they call the other one? An OBD2?
It is actually OBD2 compatible as well now, the one we have.
Okay, but yeah, so that's already built in. A lot of people also don't realize that, but we actually have all that built in as well. We just don't use it all that often because, to be completely fair, we're not having to troubleshoot too often. That comes down to a lot of our original R&D. Sometimes we'll do that, or maybe someone has had a few issues that weren't be able to be solved off basic stuff. But usually the basic troubleshooting can really solve stuff right off the bat. It's not often that we're digging into how do we use anything like that.
Right.
Let's move on. And for anybody that I'm not fully answering these questions, please feel free to comment down if you want clarification or something.
We're going to do this again?
Yeah, we're really good at rambling and going off on tangents, so take that for what it is.
What do you got?
I get most questions around weight, price, inclusions, warranty, and service life. And that is from Mr. Fisher, who operates Swish Projects in Australia, whom we ship a couple containers to a year. So he's running a nice little situation out there in Australia. So if that is where you're at, that is where you will go. Weight. Obviously, we have quite a few different engine options now. I like to always, because every engine installation can be very different, all depending on the builder itself, the airplane itself, the accessories that are added. That's just like you'll never find a real straight answer for that from any engine company. We give you a full, very honest answer, and the best way we can do that is comparatively speaking. So like our Viking 90 is exactly that of a 912 installed. We have swapped out very, very many O200s and Corvair engines with our Viking 130. They are almost identical by the time they're removed, replaced, ready to run. that of O235s as well.
Well, plus minus like 3-4 pounds with the O200 and the
Oh, yeah.
O235, of course, is heavier than our engine,
Yeah.
but close.
And then you have like the 195, which is usually slightly under that of like Titans or like Cummins, but slightly more horsepower and turbocharged. So that's kind of where weights fall. A lot of that's on our website. It's a common question. It will always be asked. People ask what the all-up weight is, and that is such a variable number. But that's why I like to give comparative numbers, because most airplanes at one point in time had an O200 on it, or maybe a Rotax, or and a lot of airplane companies also do not completely share real useful loads and stuff. We all know that. It's all marketing mumbo jumbo. But those are real world numbers. We have done those replacements many times, so we can speak to that. We're never going to sell you something and then like you be completely surprised and baffled by the time you get it. We're not the absolute lightest thing on the market. We're nowhere near the heaviest thing on the market. We have a great weight to power ratio, and the biggest thing is the power that we are actually specifying is all usable power. A lot of people say they have 130 horsepower engines, but you realize it's not really attainable.
Well, you would have to spin the propeller so fast that it's senseless.
Yes, so so that's where we're at. As far as warranty and service life, I mean, warranty can be very much a joke, because they'll always find a way in which you ruin the warranty somehow yourself. But the reality is we give a 1 year, 100 hour for any basic parts and all that kind of stuff. If something actually goes wrong in any way, shape, or form from us, and no matter how long it's been, we're always going to make it right. But if your starter goes bad in the first 6 months, or something like that happens, absolutely, we'll send you a new one. We'll get you sorted out. But that's also
That's not part of the engine. The starter.
But that's also not a very common thing that we're having to do. Most people enjoy their engine. It's not a problem. So.
It's never been an issue.
No.
It's don't get bogged up, as a suggestion here, into the little things, because we will always be there to support whoever has our engine. And even like you look at catastrophes like a prop strike, you're not out the entire engine. You're going to be like pretty much like
most cases,
gearbox. We're going to look at the gearbox and put it back together for you.
Well, we don't even have to put it back together. We inspect it. So we just we do prop strikes frequently enough. They come here, we look them over, we maybe replace a few things. You're looking at a couple $100 and labor usually, and that's the extent. Plop it back on, out 24 hours later, and you're ready to go again, minus the propeller. But that's the borderline about that. Price is always a big one. We're able to keep our prices really low due to mass production, which a lot of these shops with like investors and they're making all these parts and making little pieces here and there. We don't have to do all that, so that's why our lead time is really low. Our lead time is 1 or 2 weeks usually. We don't have a high cost in comparison. Could we charge it? Yes. Do we want to? No, that's not our end goal.
Well, if it wasn't for making a specific engine mount for a specific airplane and a cowling, the engines are in stock. They can ship the same day.
Yeah, exactly. So it's and cost is always much lower. A lot of people will they can have us completely install the engine, full package, variable pitch propeller, and still be under that of other options of just their engine alone. So it's not even comparable. It's a whole different level of price.
Don't even fall for this thing about that you're making some kind of a sacrifice to get a Viking or an auto conversion, because you're not. There's nobody else out there, no matter what kind of sales spiel, that you are actually going to compete with Honda's engineering to build a marvel of engineering.
It just makes it hard for others to compete because of that.
Yeah.
And so that's the reality.
So then the sales pitch becomes, well, if you can't afford a real airplane engine, then maybe go with that Honda car conversion. But
but 13 years in the business, we're past all that. We're moving forward, and
Well, I think the guys that have been flying like 200-300 hours a year, the last 3-4 years, are really showing that not only are the engines lasting the way we're saying that they're lasting, but they're actually like doing it. They finish their plane, they do their 40 hours, and they start flying. They don't tinker. They don't like upgrade. I mean, occasional little upgrade here and there, but they basically go out there and fly and enjoy their airplanes. As soon as that 40 hours, they take passengers. They go across the country. They go to Zenith. They go to Oshkosh. They go to Sun and Fun. They actually use their airplane. And you were talking earlier about like power to weight, and you know, I've been doing this for many years. I hear people a lot of times being like a little bit one-sided on that. It's like, it's a couple of more pounds on that engine than this one over here. Well, what have you seen up through the history of aviation? You see these really lightweight engines. Well, how do they last? Do they have internal issues? Are they burning themselves up? Do you have to put new through bolts in them and all that stuff? So the lightest possible engine for the horsepower might not be what you want. You might want just a little bit of beef in that engine to be able to sustain that horsepower over time.
That all being said too, like we're constantly replacing the old school engines with like O200s with our 130, which is the same weight, 30 more horsepower, which is totally transforming an airplane. And these people would never turn back. So, you know, it's kind of once you kind of get hooked on the idea and the simplicity and you get to know what it really is, you're pretty sold on the idea.
Well, the simplicity part though, as an outsider looking in, we know, you know, that they're simple because it's a wire loom, you stick it on these little connectors, you got an inline 4-cylinder, a little radiator on the bottom, and off you go. But a lot of times, you know, we get at the air show, it's like, well, that's a complicated, modern, fuel-injected engine with electronics. Well, there's a lot less parts on it, and it runs a whole lot better, and you never have to touch anything. So
we're not having rods shooting through our crankcase.
Well, so simplicity is, you know, it all depends on who's talking. And don't be afraid of the modern engines, even if you never like worked on one or all that stuff. If you can build an airplane, you have no problem like doing maintenance or any kind of like oil changes or even understanding how these engines run.
And redundancy, let's get into that a little bit within the computer, within the setup, as all of it, if you want to talk about
that. Well, I didn't
briefly.
really touch so much on the internals of the computer, other than that, yes, that one wire I showed you, if you can just make sure you got power to that, and there's a lot of ways to do that reliably. Then, of course, the ECU is not made such that if one thing fails to the ECU, the whole engine goes down. It's made to keep, basically it's running like 4 little engines at the same time. Most of the things we do are 3 or 4-cylinder engines, so let's just talk about the 4-cylinder engine. So the computer has drivers to drive one injector and one coil and so forth. So it focuses on running 4 little engines synchronized. And because of that, more likely than not, if you didn't have some kind of internal ECU failure, you would lose one cylinder rather than the whole engine. Now, I'd like to stress though, and go back to that, it's an extremely popular question. It has never happened that there's been an in-flight shutdown of an ECU.
No, and we've never also really had a lot of instances where spark plugs are going out or coils are going. That doesn't really happen either. That's not a huge.
There was no real question about that, and maybe someone will ask it later about the internal technology of the engine.
We'll go into that later.
Yeah, and we will.
That's a
whole different thing. Yeah.
That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
But you kind of skipped a big part of it, and a lot of the redundancy we do too is also we do a 2 battery setup, we do a 2 fuel pump setup. Everything can run on the alternator alone. Obviously, the coil packs are all separate as well.
We also have 2 like power buses. We have an engine side and everything else side.
Yeah.
And there's a fuse in between the 2, or a breaker, usually 40 amps, or
it's 30 amps.
So whatever the need of the airplane, but yeah, we do have 30 now. But so everything gets priority first for the engine. Okay, power to the engine. Whatever you want for your whiz bang avionics and stuff comes off of that, and it's protected with a fuse. So in addition to that, there's dual batteries, an alternator that can run the engine by itself, 2 fuel pumps. There's also a wire diagram that shows you how to wire it so that the engine is prioritized as far as getting power first.
Yep. And then this is kind of a loading question too, so we'll just kind of phase over this one real quick. When is the best time in the build process to put in some of these accessories? Example, I'm starting the fuselage. Should I install the header tank before putting the side or the top skins on? How about routing the fuel lines, wiring, etc., or just build and install this stuff at the end? I will say that most of the time when people come to me, it's about the time they're doing their wings and their fuel system is about the time you're going to need to start to make an engine decision. If you look at a lot of our engine installation videos, you can kind of see at the stage that the fuselage and everything is at, and that is typically when we'll start the engine installation. As far as other little things, I think are more important in that process, like your autopilot, your seats, when you put in those types of things. I wish there were a better layout from some of the aircraft companies that kind of laid that out for everybody, because I feel like people are backtracking constantly and doing a lot more work than necessary. But the biggest thing for us is the fuel system and running the lines and stuff like that. But outside of that, there's not any huge complication.
There's really plenty of room to do it at any time. I mean, if you want to leave one fuselage side off to work on the header tank or something, and you can.
Well, and then the Zenith, there's like that back baggage area, so you can even not install that, which some people have done, and it gives you full access.
You can get through the back wall. You can also, some people put the access panels in deliberately, and that's a great idea. And then the whole thing about, getting involved with talking about the fuel system and all these things that we offer, that's a whole other thing that we can do later on. Just explaining, that we don't just do engines. We actually do make sure that our engine is compatible with your airplane.
Yeah. And obviously it hasn't fully been discussed, but we do new firewall forward setups all the time. This last couple weeks, we just did a full firewall forward setup for a CH200. We have over 40 different firewall forward kits. That's what's loaded full of this hangar, different molds, decalings, and all kinds of stuff like that. We're also doing like an experimental thing, some other thing that we've done. And there's just a lot going on all the time. Maybe you guys don't always get to see all of it. There's always usually much more to share than even what we do share, in fear of just totally overloading you guys. But another one talks about, basically it goes down into the electrics and people talking about their electrical system and the safety, and that really all comes down to your own personal wiring. I don't know how much we can really dive into that more. If it's wired correctly, it's going to perform correctly.
I think that maybe just follow our wire diagram that we have on our website. I think that we obviously have, not obviously because a lot of companies do not, but we have optional things. We have pre-wired switch panels, all that kind of stuff.
Stuff to make it easier for those that maybe
aren't
as
as so
comfortable.
if you're afraid of wiring, we have all that kind of stuff. If you enjoy wiring, then it's a very basic wire diagram.
And don't take this. Don't forget that we also have services. Like if you've built your whole airplane and installed your whole engine, didn't necessarily want us to install it and wanted to do that part for yourself, we do fly out and do first flights. We don't even have to do the first flight, but this allows us to look over your whole engine installation, your airframe installation, and literally nitpick absolutely everything to where it's safe to fly as much as possible. So maybe that is what is right for you to give you that little bit of extra security that you need.
We've caught a lot of things by just people sending a whole series of pictures of their building.
And we don't have to go there. Like we'll send. It's completely free of charge. I wish more people took it upon themselves. Send us a whole video of everything you're doing. Tell us, and we will go through that whole video and tell you this, or suggestions. So don't limit yourself for what is available to you, thinking that you're bothering somebody or something. We would much rather you be safe, and for us to catch a clamp that wasn't clamped or a wire that wasn't crimped, instead of you just assuming everything is good to go and you taking it in the air and having an issue.
What's that? Clamping a clamp?
Yeah, clamping a clamp. So we're coming down to the last few questions, and I'm sorry, this is definitely a rambling video. People talked about my biggest concern being durability and affordability. Again, for experimental engines, we actually have one of the longest kind of withstanding records of any other auto conversion or any other, you know, aircraft engine companies and experimental as well as engines in the field to kind of back up the durability and reliability behind the engine. So that's never really a concern for us. There isn't a reliability issue. There isn't a durability issue. As far as affordability, you know, obviously our initial cost is much more affordable than other options out there, but your maintenance is going to continue to be more affordable as well. You're not stuck special ordering parts or anything like that. If for some reason you needed a part that we only make, we stock everything in the hundreds, if not thousands. So there's not a concern on any of that either. Lead times are not high, part availability is not an issue, and that list kind of goes on, and that all dives into mass production and having kind of the money that's behind Honda into what we are doing. So that's kind of a domino effect within itself. And then it was just another person asking about reliability, and again, I think we've documented that as much as possible. If you think we can dive into that more, let me know. I don't know how much more to do it other than, you know, we've been in business 13 years. People are flying it every single day. There's, you know, it's just not an issue.
If you're really like going to be like, well, I'm going to buy an engine and I've figured out that this one is more reliable than this one. You might be right, you might be wrong. I mean, every airplane engine is running extremely high end. There's lots of power coming out of an airplane engine.
No matter who built it.
No matter who built it, be it a Rotex engine, UL engine, a Viking engine, a VW engine, whatever it is, they work hard all the time. These engines are stressed. You want maximum horsepower to weight, like we talk about, and because of that, there's always going to be minor things. So then your question is, well, who am I going to work with if there is any minor thing? You know, am I work with a company that's, you know, constantly online, supporting their customers, talking about things. Builders are free to talk about anything they want on forums. They show anything that's going on all the time. Oh, I had a little bit of, my engine was running 5 degrees hotter than what I would like it to do, and I was on at this and this airport at this and this altitude. What should I do? And instantly they have a reply from either Viking or somebody online. It's a very friendly community. We work a lot with the Zenith crowd.
Well, we work a lot with other airplanes too. You see a lot of Zenith, but we work a lot with other airplanes.
Yeah, but I want to say that we
specialize in it.
We do a lot with Zenith. We have a lot of friends, and we have a lot of really close relationship with Zenith and their customers. And it's
we do a lot of upgrades, even that aren't our engine. You know, we have a bunch of products that we constantly sell that have nothing to do with our engine. So we're big in that community. We support that community. We're all for it. It's a very it's family to us. So that's what we're really used to, and that's a lot of what we fly. So anyway, that's it. Hope you ate all your popcorn. That's the end of the questions for this evening. But
all right, I thought it was going to be less questions. There's a lot of talking.
no, there were less questions, a lot of less talking.
Well, let's do another one in a few days.
Okay, so if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you hate us, you love us, whatever, tell us down in the comments. Thanks.
Have a good night.